The Hummingbird and the Fire. Prologue. The Fire in the Ancient Forest. Sometimes, the smallest heart burns with the greatest courage. In a deep, ancient forest where nature lived in harmony, the wind whispered through the leaves, and clear streams danced beneath towering trees. Every creature, from the mighty elephant to the tiniest ant, had a place in the great symphony of life. But none of them could have imagined how everything would change because of fire. The fire did not arrive like a roaring storm or a thunderous explosion. It began as nothing more than a wisp of smoke at the edge of the forest. A lightning strike. A brittle branch. A gust of wind, stronger than usual. And then flames. Leaves curled and blackened. Branches cracked and fell. Birds shrieked as they soared skyward. Deer sprinted across the river. Rabbits, snakes, even the proudest predators fled in panic. The forest fell into chaos. Cries for help were drowned in a cloud of smoke and ash. And in the midst of it all, a tiny hummingbird named Lumi did not flee. Lumi was no eagle, no jaguar, no creature of strength. Its wings were as delicate as petals, and its heart beat faster than the breeze. It had no claws, no roar, just a glimmer in its eyes and a heart that refused to turn away. "I have to do something," Lumi whispered to itself. Its chest trembled with fear, but its gaze stayed locked on the blaze. And then, an act that would stun the entire forest. Lumi flew to a small stream, dipped its tiny beak into the water, collected a single drop, and soared back into the inferno, releasing that drop onto the raging fire. Sizzle, almost nothing happened. But Lumi didn't stop. It flew back, dipped again. Another drop, back to the fire. And again, and again. One drop, then another, then another. The other animals paused, startled by the strange sight. A monkey scratched its head, confused. A deer asked, "What is that little bird doing? Does it think a single drop can stop the fire?" An old owl shook its head, eyes full of sorrow. "It'll be burned alive. It's too small, too weak." But Lumi didn't stop. Each beat of its wings was a declaration. "I know I can't put out this fire, but I will do what I can." And with that simple act, Lumi planted a seed, not in the ground, but in the hearts of those who watched. Have you ever felt too small in a world full of problems? We're about to discover what made Lumi so brave, and how a heart so tiny could ignite something far bigger than anyone expected. Don't miss Chapter 1. Lumi, a Little Heart in the Inferno. A chapter that reveals the origin of courage, and a choice no one saw coming. If this prologue moved your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Storylish English so you don't miss the journey ahead. Together, we'll follow Lumi through fire and fear, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find a part of yourself in those tiny wings. Chapter 1. Lumi, a little heart amidst the inferno. True courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it. As black smoke blanketed the sky and the crackling of flames echoed through the forest canopy, fear was evident in the eyes of every creature. Amidst the panic, a tiny hummingbird named Lumi flew against the tide of fleeing animals. No one understood why. Lumi wasn't considered brave by others. It didn't nest high like the eagle, run swiftly like the antelope, or have a den like the bear. But Lumi possessed something few noticed, a sensitive and awakened heart. Lumi loved its forest, every branch, every flower, every dewdrop shimmering in the morning sun. It remembered each day flying over the stream, each pause at the fiery red flower atop the hill. To the larger creatures, the forest was merely a place to survive. To Lumi, it was everything. And when it saw its beloved home engulfed in flames, Lumi couldn't turn away. "Just a drop of water," mocked the fox, watching Lumi dart between the stream and the fire. "You're going to burn yourself," squeaked the squirrel. But Lumi said nothing. It just continued. One drop of water, lifted, released onto the fire. Another drop, lifted, released. Again and again. Without pause. Without explanation. At first, no one paid attention. But then, something changed. The deer, having reached the forest's edge, stopped. It turned back toward the flames. The monkey, perched atop the highest branch to escape, silently watched Lumi, its gaze shifting from mockery to seriousness. A single drop of water couldn't extinguish the fire. But the single drop could extinguish resignation. UNDP. +1. La Louve demurs. +1. A single drop could spark a question in others' hearts. If such a small creature can act, why am I doing nothing? Therefore, the significance isn't how vast the fire is, but how willing our hearts are to start small. Lumi didn't recall how many trips it had made. Its wings grew weary. Its throat parched from the smoke. Its eyes stung. Yet, each time it was about to collapse, memories of the forest, where every flower and insect was a friend, propelled it to fly once more. "I'm coming with you." A deep voice resonated from below. It was the old elephant. Slowly, it approached the stream, filled its trunk with water, and sprayed it onto the flames. Next came the deer. Mishkiya. +3. The kids should see this. +3. Fisp. +3. Then the fox. Then a flock of parrots. La Louve demurs. One by one. Species after species. Regardless of size or speed. All took action. UNDP. And at that moment, the fire ceased to symbolize despair. It became a challenge the entire forest faced together. All of it began with a tiny hummingbird. Have you ever felt your actions were too insignificant to make a difference? Lumi didn't know if its single drop of water would help. But it knew this: doing nothing was truly meaningless. Daring to act, even the smallest deed, can sometimes be the seed from which miracles grow. Next chapter: the changing wind, when the forest becomes one. Fire can consume trees, but it cannot burn away the will of united forest creatures. What happens when courage spreads? If this chapter touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Storylish English to continue accompanying Lumi and the vibrant lessons from the forest. A small heart can rewrite an entire story. And perhaps that heart beats within you. Chapter 2: The Shifting Wind, when the forest becomes one. Unity doesn't mean being the same, it means choosing the same purpose. The wildfire hadn't gone out. It was still raging, glowing red as if it intended to consume everything. Yet, the air was no longer suffocating. Somewhere within the smoke and flames, something new was sprouting: hope. From Lumi's first small step, now the entire forest was beginning to move. The elephant led the way, slow, steady, but unwavering. No longer carrying the fatigue of routine, it now bore the weight of determination. Beside it, flocks of parrots soared through the sky, releasing water onto the smoldering ashes below. The fox, agile and clever, guided the smaller creatures away from the worst of the flames. Each creature in its own way, but all in the same direction. The fire was no longer what tore the forest apart. It was what brought the forest together. Lumi kept flying, though its wings grew sore and its heart beat wildly and erratically. But when it looked down and saw the stream filled with bustling creatures, little shadows darting between water and fire, its heart found new strength. No one asked anymore, "What difference can I make alone?" Everyone only asked, "How can I help?" Then suddenly, the wind shifted. The fire began to retreat. Smoke curled in the opposite direction. A patch of sky slowly emerged. The embers that once blazed like fury now scattered like remnants of a passing nightmare. There were no cheers. No loud celebrations. Only silence, deep and sacred. But just a moment later, a distant sound rang out: boom. The ground trembled slightly. Then another. It wasn't the sound of falling trees. It wasn't a rock slide. A new wind was coming, not from nature, but from the world of humans. The owl, wise and sharp-eyed, soared above and quickly returned. Humans have arrived. They're bringing machines, hoses, and axes. Great! They'll help put out the fire, the deer exclaimed. But the owl shook her head. No, they're not here to save the forest. They're here to finish it. The entire forest fell into stunned silence. fire was a disaster. But humans, if they didn't understand, could be the final blow. Because to them, a burnt forest was simply land ready for exploitation. Lumi wavered in the air. It couldn't believe what it was hearing. Just moments ago, the forest had seemed to be reborn. And now, it stood on the edge of being erased, not by fire, but by the cold hand of profit. "We must do something," Lumi cried out, for the first time loud and clear among the crowd. "But we're just animals," the squirrel trembled. "We can't speak human," the deer bowed its head. Then, Lumi soared higher, its eyes glowing like embers. "We'll make them see in a way no forest ever has." And so, the plan began. A forest cannot speak in words, but it can speak in images, in motion, in a rhythm of unity. That day, when the humans stepped in, they didn't just see fire. They saw elephants lined along the stream, splashing water toward the ashes. They saw birds forming a spiral in the sky, like smoke, but radiant with color. They saw a hummingbird, tiny but tireless, pouring drop by drop into the heart of the blaze. And they stood frozen. No one lifted an axe. No one started the pumps. When courage inspires, it does what words cannot. It transforms even those who once only knew how to destroy. Next chapter. The Stranger Among Trees, a Seed Seen. One of the humans. His eyes were different from the rest. They followed Lumi without blinking. Who was he? And could a seed of hope truly grow within a human heart? If this chapter touched something within you or made you reflect, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Storylish English. The story continues, and who knows, the one who creates the next miracle might just be you. Chapter 3. The Stranger in the Forest, the Seed Seen. You never know who's watching until the moment they act. Amid the footsteps of humans, there was one who stood still. He was no taller than anyone else, no differently dressed. But his eyes, they saw the forest in an entirely different way. Not a gaze of judgment or determination, but the eyes of one who listens. He saw everything as a strange ballet. The elephants marching in a line as if drawing a river. The birds diving like vibrant streaks of color in the gray smoke. And at the center, a tiny hummingbird, tirelessly continuing to carry water to extinguish the flames. Lumi. The stranger bent down, picking up a single feather, shimmering in a brilliant blue, left behind in the ashes. Then he whispered, unheard by anyone, but clear. "You're saying something, and I hear it." The crowd of people behind him continued preparing their equipment. "The conditions are good. This area is almost burnt out, easy to clear. Let's liberate the land, don't miss the opportunity." But the strangers stood up, stepping in front of the vehicles. "Wait, take a good look. What? He pointed to the forest. That little boy, the hummingbird, is struggling every second. And it's not just him. The entire forest is fighting. A snicker echoed. Fighting? There's no animal fighting. They've all run away. You've been watching too many documentaries. The stranger didn't argue. He simply extended his hand, showing them the feather he held. It was still warm, as if holding onto the breath of life. Then, suddenly, an unprecedented sight. The whole forest moved as one. The birds flew in a giant spiral overhead, forming a shape like an eye, the eye of the forest. The elephant raised its trunk high, spraying water in a rainbow arc. Each squirrel, weasel, and small bird darted through one another as if performing a dance. And Lumi was flying in a circle around the fire, the light from its wings reflecting like a shooting star. No longer chaos, but a vibrant message. A silent language, but impossible to ignore. The people were silent. Something in their eyes trembled. Not fear, not simple emotion, but awareness. The awareness that they were no longer the only ones with the right to decide. That there was another world, smaller, quieter, speaking something to them. The stranger turned and gently said, "If a little hummingbird dares to step into the fire to save its forest, then surely we, with all our strength, should not only destroy." Silence. Then, one by one, they lowered their hands and turned off their machines. The bulldozer did not start. One person quietly walked away, as if embarrassed by what they had just witnessed. Lumi stopped on a half-burned branch, panting heavily. It didn't understand what was happening, but it could only feel no more engine sounds. No more murmuring voices. Only the wind and a person slowly approaching. The stranger extended his hand but did not touch Lumi. He simply placed the small feather on the branch and whispered, "Thank you. You reminded me that I once had a heart." That night, the entire forest seemed to breathe a deep sigh. The smoke was still there. The ashes still floated. But what was strange was some human hands had helped pour water. Not out of duty, but out of choice. One person had seen. How many others will hear the forest's voice? Next chapter. The fire never dies, but hope does too. The fire has momentarily receded, but the dry season is still long. Lumi's gaze no longer carries fear, but shines with responsibility. And this time, a single bird no longer flies alone. If this chapter made you feel something, even a little, please like, share, and subscribe to the Storylish English channel. The story is not over yet, and you might be the one to write the next chapter in this real world. Chapter 4. The fire never dies, but so does hope. The fire may return, but so will the wings that rise against it. The fire was put out. Not completely, but enough for the forest to breathe again. Beneath the black ash, the seeds still lay quietly, waiting for the day to sprout. And high above, Lumi was still flying, no longer in panic, but with a purpose. Lumi knew that fire wasn't the last one. The dry season would be long. The wind could still change direction. And if humans didn't truly change, then even a tiny spark could become another wave of destruction. But this time, Lumi was no longer alone. From that morning onwards, small things began to happen. A girl living near the forest left a bowl of water by her doorstep every day. A boy brought a few seeds and scattered them at the forest's edge. The stranger from the day before, he returned, this time with a group of young people carrying buckets, spades, and a sign that read, "Regeneration Zone, do not enter." No one gave orders. No organization backed them up. It was just people who saw a small hummingbird and saw themselves in it. But then, one night, the light appeared again. Not the sun, but a red streak on the horizon. Another fire, not far from the old forest, had begun. Lumi saw it from afar. The fire was coming again. It flew higher, following the trail of smoke, its heart pounding. This time, it wasn't its own forest, but someone else's. When it arrived, the scene was all too familiar. Thick smoke. Animals scattering in all directions. Trees snapped and falling with a dry, cracking sound. And in the midst of all this, no one was flying. No bird was bringing water. No one tried. No eyes still believed they could do anything. Lumi stood still. The fire had arrived before courage could. It swallowed all hope before anyone had a chance to act. And then, Lumi heard a long, whistling sound from behind. It was the wind, stronger than ever. Wind powerful enough to turn a fire into a firestorm. If nothing was done, this forest would be gone by morning. And Lumi flew. Without thinking. Without fear. It no longer carried drops of water, but carried a message in every wing beat. Lumi flew around each flock of birds taking refuge, flapping wings, calling out, swirling in the air as if painting letters. No one understood right away, but some of the birds began to follow. Then came the squirrels, the weasels, the otters. It was as if they heard a wordless call. They stood up, not to flee, but to act. Lumi led the way, spiraling down to the nearest stream. For the first time, a small stream was formed by hundreds of feet, wings, and snouts. It wasn't enough to put out the entire fire, but it was enough to create a damp corridor, preventing the flames from spreading further. And this time, the stranger also arrived. But not alone. It was a whole group, A small team carrying pumps, fire-resistant fabrics, and hope. The fire doesn't die easily, but so does hope. The second fire was contained within 3 hours. Many bird nests were lost. Some ancient trees didn't make it, but the forest was still alive. When dawn came, the stranger placed a new sign at the entrance. This forest is protected by small, unyielding hearts. Below that was a picture of a small hummingbird, wings spread, flying through the fire. Lumi perched on a branch, tired, but not exhausted. It watched the young birds try their wings for the first time against the gray ash sky. A small call in its heart echoed. The fire will come again, but next time I will not be alone. Next chapter. The whisper on the wind, when courage becomes a living memory. As Lumi's story spreads, it is no longer just about the forest. It becomes a living legend, told around campfires, in small classrooms between concrete walls. Have you heard the whisper? If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to the Storylish English channel. Because who knows, a small action from you today, just like Lumi's wings, may ignite something unexpected in someone else's heart. Chapter 5. The Whisper on the Wings, when courage becomes a living legend. Some stories are not told through words, but through the silence of those who act. The rainy season arrived. The forest revived. The branches that once burned black now sprouted fresh green. Flowers bloomed from the scorching earth. Weeds grew over the scars. And somewhere, the familiar sound of a hummingbird's wings still echoed. But Lumi's story was no longer a secret of the forest. It began to spread far and wide, not through newspapers, not through books, but through word of mouth, through the eyes and actions of those who heard. An old man told his grandchild, "Once upon a time, there was a little bird who never gave up, even though everyone thought it was crazy." A teacher taught her second-grade class, "If you see something wrong, you can do something about it, even if it's just a small act, like a drop of water." A child, after hearing Lumi's story, placed an empty plastic bottle into the recycling bin for the first time in their life. Lumi didn't know it had become a legend. It still flew, still carrying small drops of water, not to put out fires, but to nourish the growing seedlings each day. One day, the wind shifted. It flew to another forest, unfamiliar, larger, but there was something troubling. Not fire, but silence. No birds, no animals, only the heavy sounds of machines cutting down trees, falling with a thundering crash. The trees fell, not burning but still dying. Lumi flew over an empty stretch of land where once there was a green valley. It didn't fully understand, but could clearly feel. This is not natural. This is a choice made by humans. And for the first time, Lumi didn't know what to do. It couldn't carry water to replant a forest that had been dug up to its roots. It couldn't call upon the animals, because there was no one left. It couldn't fly into the heart of the fire, because here, the ones who burned the forest were not nature, but greed. Lumi landed on the last branch of a tree that had not yet been felled. The wind blew through, making the leaves rustle softly, as if whispering a secret. What to do when courage is no longer enough? Then Lumi remembered. It wasn't that it had conquered the fire. It was that the story of it had done so. And for the first time, Lumi didn't carry water. It carried memories. It flew far away, across mountains, through fields, and even through a smoke-filled town. It sought out places with people. One by one, Lumi appeared in schoolyards, by hospital windows, in someone's garden. It didn't do anything grand, only existed. But memorable. And then, something strange happened. People began to recognize it. A child pointed, "Mom, that's the bird from the story." A man stopped throwing trash into the river, simply because he saw a little bird staring at him. A group of students put up a sign that read, "Green area, no trespassing," at the corner of a forgotten park. No one commanded. There were no heroes. It was only the memory of a small being who never gave up that made people look at themselves. And then one day, people began telling that story again. Not just in the forest, but in cities, in villages, in places where forest fires were unknown. Lumi became a symbol. But what? Not victory, not strength, but of perseverance, and the belief that even the smallest thing can change something vast. On a wall in a school, there was a mural of a hummingbird carrying a drop of water. Beneath it was written, "This story is real, if you believe that you too can be Lumi." Lumi still flies. No one guides it. But somewhere in the world, other wings are spreading out. Not birds, but humans. And in the quiet breeze, you can hear the whisper of living memory. Every person can be a small drop of water, but together we can become a rainstorm. If you've made it to the end of this story, perhaps part of Lumi lives in you. Let Lumi fly further by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the Storylish English channel. Because someone out there might be waiting to hear this story from you. Epilogue. When we too are the little birds. You may be just one drop, but remember, fire is not invincible. This world is not short of fires. Some come from nature, some are lit by human hands, and some burn quietly within us. Helplessness. That overwhelming feeling of being too small in a world too big. But the story of that tiny hummingbird showed us something. No one is ever too small to make a difference. You don't need wings. You don't need superpowers. You just need a heart that doesn't give up, and the courage to act, even in small ways, at the right moment. Maybe you're the only one who dares to speak the truth, the only one who still protects a single seedling, the only one sharing a story of hope. And then, you're not the only one anymore. A small act touches another heart. That heart touches another. And drop by drop, the rain begins to fall. In today's world, where the news can numb us, where social media makes us feel like outsiders, your choice to stand up, to not look away, is the most magical thing of all. Lumi, the hummingbird, did not disappear. It lives in every pair of eyes that dares to see the truth. It lives in every small action we take each day. It lives in you. So when you feel too small to make a difference, remember, fire does not fear silence. But it does fear a drop of water that refuses to quit. Thank you for walking this journey to the end. If this story touched you, let it fly even farther by liking, sharing, and subscribing to Storylish English. Because the world needs more Loomis than you might think. Be the drop. Be the rain. Be the story that lives on.